Welcome to On the Chain.
This is the digital asset investor. He says, he finally says that the same congressman who never would call for an investigation of ETHgate corruption despite all the video evidence and timelines, not calling Ripple evil after their SEC victory. Warren Davidson, wow, CBDCs are no different than any other technology like nuclear. They can be used good for evil. This is shameful.
Not only is there this token XRP, here's what we Ripple can do for you. And the creepy thing that I don't like about Ripple personally is that they're helping governments develop central bank digital currencies, which is evil. But that's part of the pitch that they're doing, right? So that's why it does look like, well, it looks like a certain amount of control being exerted by Ripple over how XRP can even function as a token within what Ripple's really trying to develop for the institutional investor. So the pitch deck really was different for them. And, you know, that made sense.
Okay, so I want to comment on this. So look, I mean, you get to the second part wrong, right? So the XRP, the CBDC, the only time XRP would come into use with the CBDC is if you're doing a cross-border payment, right? And the interoperability part, the CBDC itself is more than likely going to built on a private ledger, a private XRPL. So you're not going to have, and again, they can separate because they're not going to make all these things that are going on with the government on a public type of a chain. It's on chain, but again, it's a private chain. It's private behind the scenes. So when he's talking about XRP and using the XRP token, he does get that bit of it quite wrong. But again, you know, you have someone in Congress, they're going to know every little aspect of it. But he's confusing the XRP token with the CBDC. They're really two different things. But where an XRP token would come into play is on the interoperability side. So when you're actually sending, let's say, let's just say, I don't know, any country, let's say like Singapore, right? You have a CBDC over there and you're sending it over to, let's say, the UK, right? So if you wanted to send it really quick, what would be the interoperability between, you know, the native, you know, CBDC there, and let's say that even if the UK had a CBDC, right, will be the native. So that's where the XRP would come in. So the XRP would go ahead in the interoperability, it would convert to XRP, it would be there in 3 to 4 seconds and back to whatever the native currency, whatever the desired currency is. So XRP doesn't really have anything to do with this. Now, the first part of what he's talking about here, I agree wholeheartedly, right? So I got a little bit of pushback here too. He's saying the creepy part about Ripple, and he says, for me personally, is they're assisting governments with actually, you know, creating the CBDC. You know, I'm not a fan of CBDCs. I'm not. You know, I'm with Warren Davidson on this fact alone. I do agree with digital asset investor here. They can be used for good or evil. It's like a nuclear technology. Yeah, nuclear technology, you can either run power plant, which is good because here, I mean, where I live, you know, we have Turkey Point here down in Miami, which my power is nuclear, right? That's how I'm talking to you right now on my computer, right? However, you can make nuclear weapons too, right? I get what he's saying about that, okay? To me, the analogy's interesting, but I don't think the analogy's quite spot on. Because if you think about what can be used for good or evil, now when we're talking about governments here and we look at the last 3 years of how things burned to the ground, do we really think for a moment that if you can have programmability built in and you can say, well, you know, I mean, all the nonsense that happened here and again, I was against all that as well. Got to be careful about how I language that, but I was against a lot of that. Okay, so and we saw the power shift, we saw the brutality, we saw it in a number of different countries. We saw them set up camps for people who resisted the public, or I would say the government line, right? We saw a lot of that going on. You know, I commented on this a couple different times to different people, and people weighed in. It's kind of all over the board on this thing, which is I found pretty interesting. But let's take a look at this. So I said assisting countries in creating central bank digital currencies or CBDCs isn't considered evil, even though it may allow governments to limit personal freedoms. What am I missing? Given the opportunity. Now, if you go into a CBDC and you can lock out the idea that it's built on the fact that it can never be programmable, okay? I don't hear any conversations about this at all. All I hear is it's a CBDC, and what do we know about CBDCs? Well, we know that whoever the centralized, and again, remember, CBDCs, that first word of CBDC is central. It's centralized. I'm not a big fan of centralized anything, but now you have Okay, it's built on a blockchain, but you have a centralized entity that is controlled by a government, and you think that they're going to be cool and be like, yeah, we understand it's programmable, but we're probably not going to use that until they do, right? You know, anything can turn on a dime, but if you have this, and if you want to look at history, and I'm not talking about history from 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, I'm talking about history from 2 years ago. And we saw how exactly, if decentralization was in play, you wouldn't have had all these shenanigans. You wouldn't have these governments absolutely taking over and just force feeding stuff down your throat. That's just where I'm sitting on this. I'd love to see where you guys sit on this. But again, and what surprises me about digital asset investor is always about freedom and everything else. But because you're excited about a company that is going to back something, this is one of the things that Jeff and I always do here on the chain, is that we give our personal opinions. They're just our opinions. Do they mean anything? No. We know opinions are just like anything else. Everybody has one, right? Does it make it right? It does not. It's just a personal opinion. But my personal opinion is I stand on the side of freedom. I stand on the side of, I don't like the idea of anything centralized. And why do you want to build something centralized? I don't even understand the reason for a CBDC. Almost all of currency and money today in value is absolutely 100% digital. So we're going to change the name of it so we can build in programmable features that can limit and erode people's freedom. Anders came in with, hey, technologies overall could be used for evil. Being against new tech because it could be used by someone evil in the future is not the way to go. I disagree. It's absolutely the way to go until you prove to me that you're gonna issue it to a government, but you've locked out all the features of programmability. I never believe even the U.S. government, what happened here, I don't believe for a moment any government, given the chance, is going to be able to do that. Here's another take. Selling a gun to someone who later goes on to use the gun for murder isn't evil. You're providing a service or product. The service can use it for good or evil. We're talking about governments here, man. We're talking about governments who, in recent history, given the chance, were basically locking people that needed liver transplants. If they didn't have the you-know-what, they weren't getting it, okay? That was the official mandate. You were telling people you couldn't keep your job if you didn't get, if you weren't forced to take something, all right? To me, and you think that a 1.5 year difference is going to separate whether someone's going to do something bad or not, great. Let's hear Ripple come out and let's hear them talk about the fact that, hey, we're helping this government. Like I heard something was floated, I don't know if it's a rumor or not, but New Zealand. Now, if we look at what happened in New Zealand, again, do we trust any government? A government in New Zealand to do the right thing? I don't know. Maybe, hopefully, they do the right thing. I'm hopeful that all governments will do the right thing. Correct. It can be used for evil, but it must also be used for good. Probably equal amount of both. Yeah. Okay. But let's break this down. What a CBDC is. A CBDC is centralized token that's on a private blockchain. That in other words, you don't have any purview into. Okay. So what does it matter if it's using blockchain technology or not? How does that matter? How is that centralized notion? The fact that they could say, well, you know what? Listen, we don't like. It seems like you've been having a little bit too much sweets lately. You've been hitting the Danishes pretty hard, and your official weight came in a little bit over for your height. Your weight is a little bit over, so we're going to block any kind of sales of X, Y, and Z. People laugh and are like, they're like. Yeah, Chip, that'll never happen. Oh, wait, what? It'll never happen. It just happened. We just all went through this recently, right? You couldn't go into a store if you didn't have a face covering. And then it later turned out that was a bunch of nonsense, right? But all of the facts were out there. The whole idea of 6 feet, that was out there. Everything's been debunked since, but don't worry, it was all in your interest. We're going to do it for your good because you weigh a little bit too much for your height. And you're challenged in that department, well, we might have to just limit something. Oh, wait a minute, you were outspoken about what? Wait, Chip said something about this? Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to restrict him and we're going to all of a sudden banish it. Now, if you think I'm joking about this, let me bring up a little solid point here. Let's bring up some other facts. How about the brand new digital token that was just announced, the stablecoin that PayPal released? Well, what did we find out about that? Well, Wait, it turns out that there's two functions in there. One of them is freezing your wallet, and the other one is deleting it. So the ability to freeze your stablecoin that a centralized company has, that they can freeze your stablecoin, which means you can't access it, you can't use it, and ultimately they can delete it. That was discovered pretty early on, I think within a day of release. That was in the code. That's a function. That's programmability, right? It's their own stable coin. It's not a CBDC. It's a stable coin. It's backed by real world assets, gold, whatever, right? It's backed by something. But you have to think about this. Do you want to be using something? If I Venmo something and I want to Venmo you some money now, what's the difference? So am I going to use their token where, you had an opinion about something, or you wrote this comment, let's say I'm paying you for, I don't know, let's just say I'm paying you for something that I purchased from you personally, and I Venmo you some money. You wrote that comment that it was for X, and we don't like X, so guess what? Frozen. We're going to freeze your account. You think I'm joking? Well, a year ago this time, it was discovered that they also had a disclaimer that said that they could fine you $2,500 for misinformation. What does that mean? For thought. If you had a certain thought in your brain, or you expressed something, and that was deemed by the official fact checkers disinformation, guess what they could do? They could actually fine you $2,500. So this is where we're living. This is what happens when you put it in a centralized company, no different from an organization, and every company is free to do what they want. Let's just face it. For me, I've seen too many people get deplatformed. I've seen too many people, because of the way they think or they have a contrary opinion. Let's suppose I believe the Earth is it's not a big sphere like everybody says. Let's say that I think it's more of a plane. Let's say that I think, wait a minute, Chip went against the official narrative. Not good. Okay, so we're going to limit or freeze your wallet, because that's disinformation. We can't have that out in the world. And then I wanted to put this up here as well. This is, I know we're getting close on time. We probably go a little bit over today, but what the hell, I'm on a roll here. Let's do this. Let's put this up here. So Anders, this is on Digital Asset Investor's tweet, but Anders came in and said the reason he says CBDCs are evil, CBDC can be a direct liability of the Federal Reserve, which has some major implications. See below. CBDC would also provide financial inclusion and almost free transactions, something Warren Davidson cares nothing about. Wall Street trade groups are pushing back on against possibility of a digital dollar. The American Bankers Association said that a central bank digital currency would rewire the banking and financial system, and even if a CBDC accounts were capped at 5,000 per user, they would drain 720 billion in deposits, the ABA estimated. Warren Davidson answered that and said, in every dystopian future, money is corrupted from a stable store of value, and it's an efficient means of exchange into a tool for coercion and control. A CBDC is a tool for tyrants, the epitome of a permissioned network and opposite of DeFi, which is decentralized finance. China links CBDC with social credit. And if you want to look at, you can say what you want to say about this, but let's take the very first CBDC and who beat everybody to the punch, and they were just glorified. China was the one that beat everybody to the punch, right? They were the ones that released, they're so technologically advanced. Well, yeah, they're so technologically advanced that they jumped on the fact to release a CBDC. Well, there are checkpoints in China. If you live outside the city limits, if you don't have the right QR code, you're not getting into that city. If you don't have the right social score, you're not getting gasoline. If you don't have the right social score, they tied the CBDC directly to the social score, which they're able to limit and prevent users from a multitude of things here. And then we have Moon Lamel says, do you realize a permission CBDC can still be open source? That means everyone on Earth can see what the rules are without question, even if the US government has control over it. You could then argue that the US government could change code and reduce financial freedom in some way, but that's the poor argument, because government can do that right now, even if blockchain technology was never invented. If a CBDC is required by Congress by law, it's always will be open source. If it's always will be open source and anybody tries to sneak in some tyranny code into it, the people will know. Well, great, that's awesome if it's open source. Do we know it's open source when you're dealing with a government? I don't know. Look at this right here. Liz Taylor brings this up. They do it now. They froze the trucker donation banks accounts in Canada. They sure did. another famous rapper here in the United States, JP Morgan bounced him from his account. They made up a good story, but it was because he had wrong thing. Sorry. He was speaking out against things that he believed in. I don't care if you agree with him or not, but in the US, we're protected under the First Amendment or freedom of speech. He has absolutely the freedom of speech. You say, well, it's a private company. A private company is debanking somebody. Yeah, a private company was debanking somebody. Somebody else that came out recently with an organization, a company where not only they'd be banking there for over 20 years, their kids have been banking there, everybody in the company was banking there. The company and everybody associated with it was bounced. Why? Because they came out with a documentary that questioned some things. And if you think that the first CBDC ever issued by China doesn't have negative implications, you're like, well, it could be used for good. It could be used for bad. Okay, but I just say look at the recent history, and I think you kind of know. Technology is a tool regardless of whether or not it exists. People in the country must always be diligent in the face of encroaching tyranny. CBDC technology does nothing to change that fact. I will be against any CBDC that isn't open source because citizens deserve to know what's in the code. This is to me, and again, a little bit surprising. I get what Moon Lamble's saying here. I don't agree with it. You're trying to rationalize that, well, if it's open source and we know what's in the code, this is the government we're dealing with. Have you guys been paying attention for the last 2 years? This is the government. This is every government on the face of the planet, every single one, without fail. Show me one that didn't force feed stuff down your throat, de-job you if you didn't go along with the right thing, all on based on conjecture and based on a scam. It was all a scam. It's all coming out, and the evidence was there from the beginning. I don't think for a moment. I'm sorry. I'm with Warren Davidson on this. I might be the outliner on this one, but I don't trust any government for any reason. They've never done well by the people, for we the people. It's always been for we the few, we the elites, we the ones that are going to control and lay down the rules. And even some of the good people that you sent off to represent you and your government, they spoke a good game, they talked a good game, but when they got there, they got taken behind the woodshed. And what happened? They got read the Riot Act. And what did that look like? Hey, we appreciate you coming in here trying to make a dent. We appreciate your excitement, but here's how it works here. And they lay down the rules. This is so if you don't go along to get along, then they put them in compromising scenarios and situations where, oh, we got something on you. You can go out to the microphone and bitch all you want and complain, and we're going to take down this thing. The red team comes out, oh, they're angry. And the blue team comes out. And meanwhile, they're all having parties behind the scenes. They're all living it up. They're all drinking champagne together and giving the illusion that there's some difference going on. Judge for yourself. That's my stance on it. I'm sticking with it.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.